The studio lights were blinding. Rows of faces disappeared into the darkness beyond the stage, while cameras hovered like silent witnesses, waiting for something to break. At the center of the stage stood a man no one expected to see there, barefoot, dust-stained clothes, a wooden flute held gently in his hands. The screen behind IM displayed only one name, The Walker. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience before he ever spoke. One of the judges leaned forward, eyebrows raised, amused. "So," he said, tapping his pen against the desk, "tell us, why are you really here tonight?" The man hesitated, not out of fear, but as if weighing something eternal against something trivial. Then, quietly, almost apologetically, he spoke. "If I sing well," his voice steady but soft, "would you give me a plate of food?" For a moment, the room didn't know how to respond. Then the laughter came louder this time. Some laughed out of cruelty, some out of discomfort, some because the cameras told them it was time to laugh. In the control room, a producer smiled. "This is perfect," he muttered. "America loves moments like this." No one noticed the air grow heavier. No one noticed the lights flicker just once. No one noticed how suddenly quiet the man became. What they didn't understand was impulse. They thought they were judging him. But heaven had already begun judging them. And, before this night was over, before the final note was sung, America would be forced to confront a question it had avoided for far too long. What if God didn't come in glory, but in hunger? Weeks before the stage lights ever found him, before the laughter, before the cameras, the Walker had already been walking. He moved through America the way most people move past each other quietly, unnoticed. Bus stations at dawn, shelters at night, sidewalks where the forgotten slept, wrapped in cardboard and cold. He carried almost nothing. A small cloth bag, frayed at the edges. Inside it, an old piece of bread, sometimes none at all, a dented canteen with water, and a flute carved by hand from fallen wood. That was all. And yet, everywhere he went, something followed him. Not noise, not attention, stillness. One morning, outside a commuter train station, he sat beside a man slumped against a pillar, a former construction worker by the look of his hands, calloused, broken. The man stared at the ground and muttered, "Doesn't matter anymore." The Walker sat beside him without asking permission. "You're right," he said gently. "It matters even more than you think." The man never asked his name, but when he left, he walked away standing straighter than before. In another city, a young woman sat alone in a diner parking lot, crying quietly inside her car. The Walker knocked softly on her window. She nearly screamed. Instead, he said only one thing: "Your life doesn't end tonight." She would later say she had no idea why she listened, but she drove home instead of to the bridge. He slept where he could. Some at times on park benches. Some at times under overpasses. Once, on the steps of a church with locked doors and glowing stained glass behind them. No one recognized him. Most didn't even look. A businessman brushed past him one afternoon, phone pressed to his ear. "Sorry," the man snapped without stopping. "I don't carry cash." The Walker smiled anyway. An elderly woman, trembling as she walked, stopped when she heard the flute. She listened until the song ended, tears streaming down her face. "That reminded me of my husband," she whispered. "He played when we were young." She tried to give him money. He gently closed her hand. "Keep it," he said. "You've already given enough." Children noticed him more than adults. They always did. One boy asked why he didn't wear shoes. The Walker knelt and said, "So I can feel the ground I'm walking on." "What are you walking toward?" the boy asked. The Walker smiled. "Hearts." For 40 days, he walked like this, not announcing who he was, not demanding belief, not calling down fire, just watching, listening, and waiting. Because the greatest test was still ahead, and it would not happen in a church, but under the brightest lights America could build. By the 10th day, the city had already decided who the Walker was. A drifter, a harmless eccentric, another invisible soul passing through cracks no one wanted to seal. By the 20th day, Most people no longer noticed him at all. That was the point. He walked through places where compassion was supposed to live, but often didn't. In one city, he approached a glass-fronted church just before sunset. Inside, a worship band rehearsed under colored lights. Outside, the temperature dropped. He knocked softly. A volunteer cracked the door open, eyes scanning his clothes, his bare feet. "We're closed," the man said. "Service starts tomorrow morning." "I don't need a service," the walker replied. "Only a corner to rest." The door closed gently but firmly. The music inside grew louder. He slept under the awning instead, stars for a ceiling. Elsewhere, in a financial district glowing with polished steel and ambition, he stood quietly near a food truck. People lined up, laughing, scrolling, spending without thinking. When his turn came, the vendor hesitated. "Man, I can't give it away for free." The walker nodded. "I understand." A young intern behind him suddenly spoke. "I'll pay." She handed over her card quickly, almost embarrassed. The walker accepted the food, but gave it to a man sitting nearby instead. The intern stared. "Why didn't you keep it?" He smiled. Someone else was hungrier. That night, she would lie awake, wondering why that moment stayed with her. On the 31st day, he met a veteran sitting outside a closed pharmacy. The man's jacket was too thin. His hands shook, not from cold alone. The walker sat beside him without speaking. After a long silence, the veteran said, "They trained us to survive war, but not peace." The walker listened. He always did. When the man finally stood to leave, he realized the jacket on his shoulders was warmer than before. He turned back, but the walker was already gone. In a poorer neighborhood, children followed him, laughing at the flute until he played. Then they stopped laughing. The music slowed their breathing, softened their noise. One little girl asked, "Are you famous?" "No," he said. "Are you rich?" He shook his head. "Then why do you look like that?" she asked. "Like what?" "Like you're not scared." He knelt to her level. "Because I know where I belong." Not everyone responded with kindness. A man shoved him aside near a subway entrance. "Get a job." A woman crossed the street when she saw him coming. A preacher yelled at him for sitting too close to the steps. Still, the walker never argued, never defended himself, never explained. Because explanations convince the mind, but presence reveals the heart. By the 40th day, something invisible had shifted. People who had ignored I am began remembering I am, not his face, but how they felt after passing him, restless, unsettled, seen. And on that final morning, as dawn painted the city in pale gold, the walker stopped outside a subway station. He played the flute one last time before leaving the streets. Two people paused. A man and a woman, musicians, by the way they listened, not hearing notes, but recognizing something ancient beneath them. The woman whispered, "Do you feel that?" The man nodded. "That's not technique," he said. "That's truth." The walker lowered the flute. Their eyes met. And, without knowing why, they invited heaven into a place built for applause. They stood there longer than they meant to. The subway station pulsed with its usual rhythm, footsteps, announcements, the distant rumble of trains. But around the walker, time seemed to thin. Martha was the first to speak. "I don't understand," she whispered, as if afraid the moment might break. "It's just a flute." Her husband, Daniel, didn't answer right away. He had spent his life around music concert halls, studios, auditions where talent was measured, dissected, ranked. He knew skill. He knew training. "But this isn't about sound," he finally said. "It's about truth." The walker lowered the flute slowly, as if he had already known they would stop. Martha stepped closer, her eyes searching his face, not with curiosity, but recognition. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The walker smiled gently. "My hands were made for beauty," he said, "and for mending." Daniel frowned, not in suspicion, but in wonder. "That doesn't answer the question." "It answers the right one," the walker replied. People passed behind them, brushing shoulders, unaware that anything unusual was happening. To the world, it was just another homeless man playing music underground. But Martha felt something tightening in her chest. "You don't play for money," she said. "No." "You don't perform for attention." "No." "Then why do you play?" The walker met her gaze. "Because some hearts are listening, even when they don't know it." Daniel exhaled slowly. He had heard hundreds of performers explain their passion. None had ever spoken like that. "We're judges," Martha said suddenly, surprising even herself. "For a national talent show." The walker nodded, as if she had told him the sky was blue. "There's an audition in 2 days," Daniel added. "Live television, millions watching." The walker said nothing. Martha hesitated. "We don't usually do this," she admitted. "But would you consider coming?" The noise of the station swelled around them again, like the world reclaiming its place. "I should tell you," Daniel said carefully. "They won't be kind." The walker's eyes held no fear. "They never are." Martha swallowed. "They'll judge your clothes, your background, everything but the music." He smiled, not sadly, but knowingly. "Then they will reveal themselves." Daniel shifted his weight. "You wouldn't get paid unless you advance." The walker looked down at his bare feet, then back up. "I'm not going for money." Martha reached into her bag and pulled out a card. "This is the address. Come early. We'll make sure you're registered." The walker accepted the card with both hands, as if it were something sacred. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing." Martha frowned. "We don't even know your name." The walker paused. "For now," he said, "they call me the Walker." Daniel chuckled softly. "Figures." As they turned to leave, Martha stopped. "There's something about you," she said quietly. "I feel like meeting you already changed something in me." The walker smiled, warm, gentle, unmistakably kind. "It already has," he said. They walked away, hearts unsettled, unaware that they had just invited heaven into a room built for judgment. And the walker returned the flute to his lips one last time underground, as if saying goodbye to the streets, before stepping into the light. The building looked like a temple. Glass walls, polished steel, screens everywhere, each one glowing with faces desperate to be seen. Inside, power hummed softly. Not the kind that healed, the kind that measured worth in numbers. At the top floor, behind a desk large enough to feel like a border, sat Victor Hale, executive producer of American Resonance, the most watched talent show in the country. 53 years old, perfectly tailored suit, a smile trained to appear warm without ever reaching the eyes. Victor leaned back in his chair as a junior producer spoke. "So, the couple brought in a street performer," she said, scrolling on her tablet. "No manager, no credits, no background." Victor's eyebrow lifted. "A homeless act?" he asked calmly. "Yes." The room waited. Victor smiled. "Well," he said, "God bless their hearts." Laughter followed, thin, practiced. He stood and walked toward the wall of monitors showing live camera feeds, rehearsals, makeup rooms. "People say they want authenticity," Victor continued. "They say they want something real." He tapped the glass lightly. "What they want is permission to feel superior." No one argued. He turned. "Where's this Walker scheduled?" The assistant hesitated. "Late in the show," Martha insisted. Victor nodded slowly. "Good." He returned to his chair. "By then, the audience will be warm, comfortable, judging." He clasped his hands. "Make sure the cameras linger." "On what?" someone asked. Victor smiled again. "The feet, the clothes, the confusion." A producer shifted uncomfortably. "That feels risky." Victor's eyes hardened just a fraction. "Risky is boring television," he said. "Humiliation is memorable." Silence. "Look," Victor added, softening his tone, "if he's talented, great. The contrast will make it bigger." "And if he's not?" the assistant asked. Victor shrugged. "Then we gave America what it loves." Another producer spoke up. "Martha and Daniel really believe in him." Victor waved a dismissive hand. "They still believe music can save people." A beat. "That's cute." He leaned forward. "Do you know how many careers I've built?" he asked. "How many lives I've made visible?" No one answered. "I don't destroy people," Victor continued. I reveal them. The words settled in the room like smoke. Make sure the judges can't interrupt, he added. No delays, no speeches. Someone nodded. And the audience? Victor's smile widened. They'll do the rest. As the meeting ended, Victor remained alone. He stared at the monitors, faces frozen mid-expression. He didn't see people. He saw narratives. Years ago, he had loved music, loved it enough to believe it mattered. Then the world taught him better, or so he thought. Downstairs, contestants rehearsed. Judges prepared notes. Cameras warmed. And somewhere across the city, the walker approached the building slowly, not as someone chasing opportunity, but as someone walking willingly into a storm that would expose every heart in the room. Victor Hale didn't know it yet. But that night, for the first time in decades, control would slip through his fingers. Backstage didn't smell like art. It smelled like perfume, hairspray, anxiety, and ambition. Mirrors lined the walls, each surrounded by bright bulbs that erased shadows and revealed flaws no one else could see. Contestants paced, vocalized, stretched, checked their phones, checked themselves, and then the walker arrived. Conversation slowed, not stopped but thinned. Eyes moved first to his feet, then to his clothes, then to the flute. A young man with bleached hair leaned toward his group and whispered, "Is this some kind of stunt?" A girl in a sequined jacket laughed quietly. "Must be," she said. "No way this is real." The walker took a seat along the wall, placing the flute carefully across his knees as if it mattered. It did. A contestant named Evan, already popular online, stepped closer, phone half raised. "So what's your angle, man?" he asked, smiling for the camera. "Inspiration porn? Redemption arc?" The walker looked up calmly. "I'm here because I was invited." That only made them laugh harder. "Invited?" another voice said. "To this?" Someone clapped sarcastically. "Welcome to the big leagues." A girl named Lena, younger than the rest, watched from a distance. She said nothing. Her fingers twisted together nervously. Evan circled the walker slowly. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "This is a competition. People here worked for this." The walker nodded. "So did you." That wasn't the answer Evan expected. "What does that mean?" he snapped. "It means pain has many uniforms," the walker replied gently. Evan scoffed. "Save it for the judges." Another contestant chimed in, grinning. "Hey, Walker," he said, "if you win, what are you going to do with the money?" The walker paused. "Feed someone." Laughter again. Someone pushed a plastic cup into his hands. A mix of leftover drinks, coffee, soda, hot sauce, something bitter and wrong. "Here," the girl in sequins said sweetly. "Bless it." Phones came up now, angles chosen, humiliation framed. The walker looked at the cup, then at her. "You don't need this," he said softly. Her smile faltered, just for a second. "Drink," Evan said. "Or are you too holy?" The walker exhaled, not in defeat, in resolve. He lifted the cup and drank. Every drop. No grimace, no hesitation. He handed the empty cup back. For the first time, the room grew quiet. Someone swallowed. "That was gross," Evan muttered, suddenly unsure. The walker met his eyes. Cruelty always is. Evan stiffened. "Don't psychoanalyze me." "I'm not," the walker said. "I'm seeing you." Evan laughed too loudly. "You don't know anything about me." The walker's voice remained steady. "You learned early that love was earned," he said. That silence meant approval. That applause meant safety. Evan froze. "How do you know my name?" he whispered. The walker tilted his head. "I know many names." The girl in sequins crossed her arms. "Oh, please," she snapped. "Now he's a prophet." She stepped closer. "Why don't you get angry?" she demanded. "Why don't you fight back?" The walker's gaze softened. "Because anger would only make you feel justified." Her breath caught. "You don't know me," she said. "I know you're tired," he replied. "Tired of pretending you're enough." She turned away abruptly, blinking fast. Lena finally spoke. "Stop," she said quietly. They looked at her, surprised. "This isn't funny anymore." No one responded. The moment passed. A voice over the loudspeaker announced, "Contestants, 5 minutes to stage." The room snapped back into motion. Evan grabbed his jacket. "We'll see you out there," he said, forcing a grin. "Hope your thing works." One by one, they left. Except Lena. She lingered. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know what to do." The walker smiled. "You did more than you realize." As she walked away, the walker closed his eyes briefly. The cruelty backstage had been sharp days. But it was only the beginning, because soon the judgment wouldn't be whispered, it would be broadcast. The hallway outside the stage was colder, not in temperature but in tone. Contestants lined the walls, stretching, whispering, rehearsing breaths, the way soldiers rehearse survival. Each one stared ahead, pretending not to notice the others. The walker stood apart. No warm-up, no pacing, no mirror, just stillness. A stage assistant approached him with a clipboard, eyes flicking quickly to his feet, then away. "You're up soon," she said flatly. "Participant number 7. The walker nodded. She hesitated, then added, quieter, "Good luck." Luck had nothing to do with this. As the minutes passed, something subtle shifted. The laughter from backstage faded. The cruelty lost its edge. What replaced it was unease. Evan leaned against the wall, jaw tight. He told himself it was nerves, but he knew better. He kept hearing the words, "Love was earned." Applause meant safety. Across the room, the girl in sequins stared at her reflection. No amount of makeup softened what she saw now. Lena sat on a folding chair, hands clasped, watching the walker. She had seen performers panic before, cry, breathe into paper bags. But this man, he looked as if he were waiting for something far heavier than a performance. The red light above the stage door flickered. 5 seconds. 4. 3. Evan muttered under his breath, "Let's see what you've got." The walker stepped forward. Before he reached the door, Victor Hale's voice crackled through a headset somewhere above. "Stand by," the producer said calmly. "Let the moment breathe." On stage, the crowd shifted, restless. They didn't know what they wanted yet, but they were ready to take something. The walker paused just before the curtain. He could hear them now. The murmurs, the impatience, the hunger for judgment. This was the test, not of talent, of hearts. He didn't pray out loud. He didn't raise his hands. He simply whispered, barely audible, "Father, forgive them." The curtain opened. Light flooded in. Applause scattered polite, uncertain. As he walked onto the stage, laughter rippled again. Softer than before, but sharper. Someone coughed. Someone scoffed. The judges leaned forward. Martha's hands trembled slightly. Daniel held his breath. Victor smiled. This was the moment he loved most. The moment before the fall. The walker reached center stage. He lifted the flute, brought it to his lips, and waited. Not because he was unsure, but because the test was not whether he would sing. The test was whether anyone would listen before the world decided he was unworthy of being heard. And somewhere deep in the control room, a finger hovered over a switch. The final step was coming, and heaven was very, very quiet. The first note should have filled the room. It didn't. The walker's fingers moved gently over the flute. His breath was steady, his posture calm. But the speakers stayed silent. For half a second, no one reacted. The audience waited. Someone frowned. Another leaned toward a friend and whispered, "Is this part of it?" The walker continued to play. Still nothing. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd, then laughter. At first, it was nervous. Then it grew bolder, crueler. "What is this?" someone shouted. A man in the back clapped mockingly. The walker's eyes flicked toward the judge's table. Martha's face drained of color. "There's no sound," she whispered urgently. "The mic, something's wrong." Daniel turned toward the stage manager, signaling. Victor Hale raised a hand calmly. "Let it play out," he said into his headset. "Technical issues happen." On stage, the laughter swelled. The walker lowered the flute slightly, listening, not to the room, but beyond it. He understood now. This wasn't failure. It was design. In the control room, Victor leaned back in his chair. Camera 1 tight on the bare feet. Camera 2, the confused face. Camera 3, the audience laughing. "Beautiful," Victor murmured. "Hold it." A producer shifted beside him. "Shouldn't we fix the audio?" Victor didn't look away from the monitors. Not yet. Back on stage, someone yelled, "Sing louder." Another voice cut through the noise. "Get off the stage." The walker's shoulders remained still. No flinch, no anger. He raised the flute again and played on. Martha stood. "This is wrong," she said, her voice shaking. "He hasn't been given a chance." Victor turned slowly, smiling. "This is his chance." Daniel clenched his jaw. "You're humiliating him." Victor shrugged. "America's watching." On stage, the walker finally stopped. The room quieted slightly. Sensing something had shifted, he stepped toward the microphone. There was no anger in his voice, no accusation. "I see there are difficulties tonight," he said calmly. "But truth doesn't need speakers." Some laughed again, uneasy now. Others leaned forward despite themselves. "If you have ears to hear," he continued, "you will hear." Victor frowned. "What is he doing?" he muttered. The walker looked directly into the main camera. Not at the audience, at the nation. "And if you have eyes to see," he said, "you will see." The laughter died. The lights flickered just once. In the control room, a technician glanced at the board. "Did you authorize that?" he asked. "No," Victor snapped. On stage, a stillness settled thick, unnatural. The walker lifted the flute again. Victor stood abruptly. "Restore the audio," he ordered. A technician flipped the switch. Nothing happened. "What?" Victor barked. I don't understand," the tech stammered. "The system's responding." But the walker began to play, and though the speakers were still silent, the music filled the room. Not through wires, not through technology, but through something deeper. The sound wasn't loud, it was present. People froze. A woman's eyes filled with tears without knowing why. A man's breath caught in his chest. The laughter vanished. Victor stared at the monitors, his smile gone. "That's impossible," he whispered. On stage, light began to gather, soft, warm, alive. The sabotage had failed. Or rather, it had succeeded in revealing something far greater. And for the first time that night, the world wasn't watching for entertainment. It was listening. No one could explain where the sound was coming from. The speakers were still dead. The audio board unresponsive. Every technical rule violated. And yet, the music was everywhere. It didn't arrive as noise. It arrived as memory. It moved through the room, the way wind moves through tall grass, unseen, undeniable. People didn't hear it first. They felt it. A woman in the third row pressed her hand to her chest, confused by the sudden tightness there. A man beside her swallowed hard, eyes burning for reasons he didn't understand. The melody was simple. No complexity, no showmanship, just truth unadorned. The walker stood at the center of the stage, eyes closed, flute resting against his lips. Light gathered around him, not sharp or blinding, but warm like sunrise filtering through fog. In the control room, Victor Hale stared at the monitors. "Cut to commercial," he snapped. A producer shook her head. "I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" "The system isn't responding," she said, her voice trembling. "It's like it's not ours anymore." Victor slammed his fist onto the desk. "Fix it!" But nothing changed. On stage, the judges were frozen. Martha's hands trembled openly now. Tears slid down her face unchecked. Daniel whispered, "I've heard every great musician alive." His voice broke. "This is different." The melody shifted, still gentle, but deeper now. It pressed against the walls people had built inside themselves. A teenage girl in the balcony remembered a night she had locked herself in a bathroom with a blade. She hadn't told anyone. She lowered her head and began to sob. A businessman felt the weight of every name he had forgotten, every employee he had discarded for profit. His jaw clenched. then shattered. Somewhere backstage, Evan dropped to his knees. He didn't know why, only that something inside him was breaking open. The girl in sequins clutched her arms around herself, shaking, not from fear, but from exposure. The voice she had silenced for years was suddenly loud. "You are loved." She covered her mouth, breath hitching. Lena stood still, tears streaming freely. She wasn't afraid. She was home. The walker began to sing, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a voice that seemed to exist beneath language. The words weren't English. They weren't any language. And yet, everyone understood. "I walked among you unseen. I stood at your doors hungry. I waited in your streets, ignored. And still, I loved you." The lights above flickered again, but no one noticed now. The melody carried confession without accusation, truth without condemnation. In the control room, Victor felt his breath shorten. "No," he whispered. "This isn't real." But his hands were shaking. The song continued. "You asked for signs. You asked for proof. But you looked away when love arrived quietly." Victor's vision blurred. For the first time in decades, he felt something he had trained himself to kill: shame. The walker's voice softened further, somehow reaching farther as it did. "I did not come to perform. I came to reveal." The light around him grew brighter, not harsher, but fuller, filling the stage like breath fills lungs. People shielded their eyes, not in pain, but awe. A man in the audience dropped his phone. A woman reached for a stranger's hand. Across the country, living rooms fell silent. Millions watched, unable to look away. The music slowed. One final note lingered in the air, vibrating through bone and memory. And when it faded, something remained. Not sound, not light, but a knowing. The walker lowered the flute, opened his eyes, and for the first time that night, he looked directly at them. All of them, as if seeing every heart at once. The sound without speakers had done its work. What came next would change everything. The room did not applaud. No one moved. It was as if sound itself was waiting for permission. The walker stood beneath the lights, no longer harsh, no longer theatrical. They seemed to bend toward him, as if light had finally remembered its purpose. He lifted his head, and then he spoke, not to the judges, not to the cameras, but to the truth hiding inside every person watching. "You wanted a performance," he said quietly. "You wanted something impressive." His voice did not echo. It settled. "But I came with hunger," he continued. "And you asked for proof." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward. The walker began to sing again. "This time, the words were clear, not loud, not forceful, unavoidable. I came to your doors in borrowed clothes. I slept where mercy forgot its name. You crossed the street. You checked your phone. You said you'd help some other day." A woman in the front row covered her mouth. She had done exactly that. "Yesterday, I asked for water. You asked for credentials. I asked for shelter. You asked for silence." Somewhere in the balcony, a man began to shake. He had built his life on silence, on not seeing, not feeling, not caring. "I did not come with thunder. I did not come with crowns. I came disguised as inconvenience, and waited to be recognized." The judges could no longer remain seated. Martha was openly weeping now. Daniel's hands were clasped together, not in performance, but prayer. Backstage, Evan pressed his forehead to the concrete floor. The masks he had worn since childhood, confidence, cruelty, superiority, were slipping off like dead skin. "I'm tired," he whispered to no one. "I'm so tired." The girl in sequins slid down the wall, sitting on the floor as tears soaked through layers of makeup she had believed would save her. "I didn't know how to be enough," she sobbed. On stage, the song deepened. "You searched for meaning in mirrors, for love in numbers and noise. You crowned the loudest voices king, and called the quiet disposable." The words were not accusations. They were mirrors. Across the nation, something cracked open. In a small apartment, A man who had lined up pills on his kitchen table reached out and swept them into the trash. He sat down on the floor and cried until the night softened. In a hospital room, a mother holding her fevered child felt the heat ease. She pressed her lips to her child's forehead, not knowing why hope suddenly felt possible again. The walker's voice gentled further. I walked your streets unseen, because love must choose humility to reveal who you truly are. The light around him intensified, not blinding, but revealing. It showed faces as they were, not curated, not filtered, human. Victor Hale stood in the control room, frozen. The monitors reflected his face back at him. For the first time, he saw what he had become. Not powerful, not brilliant, empty. I didn't know how else to survive, he whispered. As if in answer, the walker's eyes lifted, meeting Victor's through layers of glass and technology. And still, there was no anger there. Only grief. I did not come to end you, the song continued. I came to invite you home. Victor's knees buckled. He caught himself on the console, breath ragged. I can't undo it, he said aloud. I can't undo what I've done. The walker sang on. You cannot undo the past, but you can choose the next act of love. The melody slowed. Each note landed heavier than the last. The walker stepped forward, extending his hands. The audience gasped. Marks were visible now, not fresh wounds. Scars, old, healed, undeniable. A sound rose from the crowd, something between a sob and a prayer. I bore the weight you run from, he sang softly. I carried shame, so you wouldn't have to. And I am still here. The final note hung in the air, trembling. When it faded, the silence that followed was not empty. It was full, full of recognition. And everyone understood, at once, this was never about music. It was about the moment you realize who has been standing beside you all along. The air felt heavier now, not oppressive, consecrated. The walker stood motionless at the center of the stage, hands still extended, scars visible beneath the glow that no lighting technician could explain. No one laughed anymore. No one whispered. Even breathing felt too loud. The cameras, still rolling, struggled to adjust. Exposure failed, colors washed out. The light around him refused to be contained by lenses built for lesser things. Martha fell to her knees first, not dramatically, not for the cameras. Her body simply gave way beneath the weight of understanding. Daniel followed, hands shaking, tears streaming freely down his face. It's you, he whispered. Not a question. A confession. Across the judge's table, the other panelists sat frozen, eyes wide, mouths parted, unable to reconcile what they were seeing with the world they thought they knew. Victor Hale staggered backward in the control room. No, he said hoarsely. This isn't possible. But the word possible no longer belonged to him. On stage, the walker lowered his hands. When he spoke, his voice was no longer only gentle. It carried authority, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that steadies mountains. I have walked among you, he said, hidden in what you dismiss. The light brightened, not harsher, but clearer. The stains on his clothes vanished. The fabric became radiant white, untouched by shadow. His face, still familiar, now carried a depth no human expression could hold, alone love and sorrow woven together. You looked for me in success, he continued, and missed me in suffering. A man in the audience fell forward, face to the floor. A woman clutched her chest, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since childhood. You invited me when you saw value, he said, turning toward Martha and Daniel. And you rejected me when I asked only for rest. His gaze moved across the room, unhurried, precise. Each person felt seen, not scanned, known. To those who mocked, he said, I forgive you. The words struck harder than condemnation ever could. To those who remained silent out of fear, he continued, I understand. Lena pressed her hand to her mouth, sobbing. And to those who used power to wound, his eyes lifted again toward the control room, I offer repentance. Victor's legs finally gave out. He collapsed to the floor, his tailored suit crumpling beneath him. I didn't mean to become this, he choked. I just wanted to win." The walker's voice softened, but did not weaken. "What does it profit a man," he asked quietly, "to gain the world and lose his soul?" The question echoed, not only through the studio, but through millions of homes watching live. The light around him expanded, not outward, inward. People felt it reach places untouched for years. A woman in a wheelchair near the aisle gripped the armrests suddenly. Her eyes widened. "I can feel my legs," she whispered. Her husband turned, breath caught in his throat. Slowly, hesitantly, she stood. The crowd gasped as she took one step, then another. Some cried out. Some fell to their knees. Some simply stared, undone. But the greatest miracle was quieter. It was happening inside. Walls crumbled. Pride cracked. Defenses collapsed. The walker lifted his hands one final time. "I did not come to entertain," he said. "I came to reveal." The light intensified, filling the stage, the seats, the air itself. And in that brilliance, there was no doubt left. This was not a performer, not a metaphor, not a story. This was Jesus Christ, standing in the middle of modern spectacle, asking an ancient question. "Will you recognize me when I come without applause?" The stage could no longer contain him, and what followed would ripple far beyond this room. The studio no longer felt like a studio. The stage lights dimmed, not because anyone touched a control, but because something brighter had taken their place. The applause sign above the audience flickered uselessly. Forgotten, Jesus stood at the center. No music now, no spectacle, only presence. He looked out across the crowd slowly, deliberately allowing the silence to do its work. "Tonight," he said, "you expected to judge voices." A pause. "But you were asked to examine hearts." No one spoke. No one dared. "You measured worth by polish," he continued, "by confidence, by what could be packaged and sold." His eyes moved gently from row to row, but when love arrived unannounced, you laughed. The words were not sharp. They were surgical. You saw poverty and assumed failure. You saw weakness and called it irrelevance. You saw hunger and asked for entertainment. Some in the audience lowered their heads. Others covered their faces with their hands. Jesus did not raise his voice. He did not accuse. He revealed. "I did not come to shame you," he said. "If shame could heal, the world would already be saved." A quiet sob broke the stillness. Somewhere near the aisle, a man whispered, "I didn't know." Jesus nodded. "Many of you did not," he replied, "and that is why I came this way." He took a step forward. The crowd instinctively leaned back, not in fear, but awe. "I came hungry," he said, "to see who would feed me. I came tired, to see who would offer rest. I came unseen, to see who would look twice." His gaze lifted to the judge's table. "To those who welcomed me without knowing my name, you chose love." Martha wept openly now. Daniel bowed his head. Jesus' eyes then swept toward the control room. "To those who built kingdoms on humiliation, you revealed your need for mercy." Victor lay prostrate on the floor, shoulders shaking. "And mercy," Jesus said, "is still available." The words fell like rain on scorched ground. Then he turned outward beyond the walls, beyond the cameras. "To those watching from living rooms, hospital beds, prison cells, this question is not for the people in this room alone." The camera zoomed in, unbidden. Jesus looked directly into the lens, into millions of eyes. "When I come to you tomorrow," he said, "not in light, but in inconvenience. When I come as the person you would rather avoid, when I come poor, broken, ignored, will you recognize me?" The question did not demand an answer. It demanded a life. Jesus opened his hands once more. "You will not be asked how famous you were," he said, "or how successful. You will be asked if you loved." Silence stretched. Holy, unavoidable. Then Jesus spoke one final sentence, quiet, unwavering, eternal. "What you do for the least of these, you do for me." And with that, the show, as the world understood it, was over. The silence did not break. It settled. Like dust after an earthquake, it hung in the air heavy with meaning, impossible to ignore. Jesus stood still for one final moment. The light surrounding him softened, no longer blazing, but deep like embers that never die. Then, slowly, his feet lifted from the stage. No wires, no mechanisms, no explanation. A collective gasp rippled through the room as he rose, calm, unhurried eyes still fixed on the people below. "This is not the end," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly. "It is the beginning." The light intensified. And then he was gone. No explosion, no thunder, just absence. The space where he had stood remained illuminated for a breath longer, then faded. The stage was empty. For 3 full seconds, nothing moved. Then someone screamed, not in terror, but awe. Others collapsed to their knees. Some reached upward instinctively, as if afraid they had missed something essential by blinking. The cameras continued rolling. No one remembered to stop them. In the control room, Victor lay motionless, face pressed to the floor, not broken, unmade. Martha and Daniel stood together, hands clasped tightly, tears flowing freely. "He came," Martha whispered. "He actually came." The host remained frozen at center stage, microphone hanging uselessly at his side. The words he had rehearsed for years, catchphrases, segues, charm, had no place here. There was nothing left to say. Across the audience, people began to leave their seats, not rushing for exits, but drawn toward one another. Strangers embraced. Old grudges surfaced and dissolved. Some prayed for the first time in decades. Others simply wept, unable to explain why. A woman who had walked moments earlier sat quietly now, hands over her face, laughing and crying at once. "I can still feel it," she said, "the warmth." Beyond the studio walls, the world was already changing. Phones rang unanswered. News stations scrambled for language that didn't exist. Social feeds exploded, then fell strangely quiet, as if commentary itself felt inadequate. In hospitals, doctors stared at charts they couldn't reconcile. In prisons, hardened men sat in silence, shaking. In living rooms, families held one another without speaking. Something had passed through them, something permanent. Hours later, long after the audience had gone, a janitor entered the empty studio. He stopped at the center of the stage, right where the light had been. He stood there for a moment, then removed his cap and bowed his head. Outside, night settled over the city. On a side street, barely lit, a man walked alone. Simple clothes, unremarkable face. He passed a woman sitting on the curb, crying quietly into her hands. He stopped, knelt, spoke softly. No one noticed. No one filmed. And yet, everything mattered, because Jesus had not left. He had only returned to where he always walked, among the unseen, the ignored, the least. The question was no longer if he would come again. The question, for everyone watching, was whether they would recognize him when he did. Before you leave this story, pause. Not for applause, not for commentary, but for honesty, because this was never just a story about a stage or a talent show or a miracle broadcast to millions. This was a mirror. Jesus did not appear in glory first. He came as inconvenience, as discomfort, as someone easy to ignore, and the question he asked that night is the same one he asks us now. Would you recognize him if he came without warning, without beauty, without benefit to you? Heaven does not always thunder. Often it whispers. It walks beside us, in the hungry, the tired, the unseen. If this story stirred something in you, a discomfort you can't name, a warmth you didn't expect, or a quiet conviction, that matters. That means your heart is still listening. If you believe heaven still walks with us, take a moment to like this video. Not for numbers, but as a small act of agreement. Leave a comment and answer this honestly. Where do you think Jesus appears today that most people overlook? Share this story with someone who needs hope, someone who feels unseen, or someone who thinks faith no longer speaks to the modern world. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Heaven Walks with Us. Not because we have all the answers, but because we are committed to telling stories that remind us of one eternal truth. God has never stopped walking among us. The only question is, will we see Him when He does?